Ayan na. Tapos na. Tapos na yung inaabangan natin na interview ni Tito Boy with the leading candidate so far sa ating elections. Of course, no less than former Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Bongbong Marcos or BBM. I hope napanood niyo yan. Andyan pa ba kayo? Napanood niyo ba yan? Nandyan lang sa YouTube yan. For free yan, ha? Pwede niyo panoorin yan. All I can say, to begin with, actually marami akong sasabihin. The first thing I want to say is that actually that was a very comprehensive and very interesting conversation at maraming topics ay na-cover quite extensively. Masasabi ko rin na medyo maganda yung format kasi unang-una may time si Tito Boy para i-explain yung konteksto ng tanong, no? And then give around 5 minutes for answers at saka yung interaction, no? So actually may intervention din yung host para i-make sure na talaga sasagutin ng mabuti, no? At i-cover yung mga iba't ibang angles ng specific issue na pinag-usapan. So in that sense, actually overall I can say that happy ako, satisfied ako dito sa interview format. At saka specifically dito sa interview with former Senator Bongbong Marcos. And di ba yun din ang sinabi ko sa inyo na do not underestimate Tito Boy. Yes, he does showbiz and all of that and my fast talk part and all na pag-usapan natin shortly. But sabi ko nga, he's a hybrid talent. He's a special talent at kaya niya mag-straddle, no, or navigate both serious political analysis and also showbiz and entertainment. So nakikita natin talaga na very intense at very dedicated talaga si Tito Boy dun sa question and interview, no, with Senator Bongbong Marcos. And nakita natin na si BBM was also very comfortable at okay nga yung forma niya, talagang yung K-pop style. Medyo baguette style si BBM . At nakita natin si BBM very comfortable din siya even when very sensitive issues were raised, no, including yung legacy ng human rights violations nung panahon ng Marcos dictatorship. And of course, but yung issue ng ICC among others. Let me just quickly go through a number of issues na na-raise dito sa interview niya. And of course, I'm not gonna go through all of the questions. I'm gonna go through the key issues that were raised. The first thing I want to say is this. Mukhang tama yung kutob natin na kung sino magiging next president natin, mukhang magkakaroon ng improvement dito sa mindless drug war ni Paolo Duterte. President Duterte may have had the best of intentions in dealing with the drug war issue, but clearly nakita natin both Senator Lacson and former Senator BBM dun sa kanilang interviews with Tito Boy, na-clarify nila na yes, there has to be an enforcement aspect and mukhang may mga abuses at excesses na nangyari, but you also have to focus on the aspect of rehabilitation and prevention, and you have to also treat it as a public health policy issue. No? So in fairness kay BBM, I think he ticked all the boxes, no, in terms of having a smart war. So lahat tayo, of course, galit tayo sa droga, but hindi naman totoo na nagiging narco state na tayo na alam Mexico or Colombia or something like that. So very reasonable yung sagot ni Bongbong Marcos and very much parang almost identical yung sinabi niya dun sa sinabi ni Lacson yesterday. And I won't be surprised if Vice President Leni Robredo, and I've already interviewed Isko on this, will say similar things, which is, yes, dapat labanan ang droga. Yes, dapat meron tayong talagang sagot dyan. This is a serious issue. But let's not exaggerate it na nagiging narco state daw tayo at hindi lang tayo focus sa enforcement. So in fairness, Bongbong Marcos didn't use that term, but he said something like, dapat yun ang ginamit niya. Surgical dapat ang approach. No? Yung approach dapat nating surgical, targeted dun sa talagang mga drug lords, mga big fish na yan. At aminin natin, let's just be honest, ilan bang big fish? Yung totoong big fish, hindi yung mga dyan, talagang big fish, national, big level big fish, ang nahuli or naparusahan under President Duterte. No? So in fairness to BBM, very similar to Senator Lacson, and I expect same din ang sasabihin nila Isko, base doon sa interviews ko with Isko, and yan din ang sasabihin ni Lenny and Pacquiao and other candidates, na talagang kailangan natin ng smart war. Hindi lang yung bara-bara lang na walang due diligence. Kasi bara-bara yung ginawa ni Pangulong Duterte. Kaya nga parang palpak yung nangyari. So what you need is, you combine good intention with good strategy. So in fairness to Senator Marcos, former Senator Marcos, if ever he becomes our next leader, he's indicating that he's gonna have a smarter, surgical, and more humane approach na talagang tignan mo yung aspeto ng public health policy, tignan mo yung aspect ng rehabilitation, tignan mo yung aspect ng prevention, tignan mo yung aspect ng community-based solution. So, interesting. That was encouraging to hear from former Senator BBM. And it's good to know that the candidates are openly discussing yung mga deficiencies ng mga at saka mga kakulangan no dun sa policy ni Pangulong Duterte na more bara-bara talaga na walang due diligence at masyadong emphasize yung aspeto ng enforcement which in itself has not been very effective at the expense of other elements of dealing with the drug war. At maganda rin minention ni BBM na kung titignan mo yung Amerika, meron din silang drug war at some point very violent. Hindi mo na kailangan manood ng narcos na makikita mo yung DEA agents operating all around the world, especially in the Americas. Pero hindi nag-work eh. Parang lumala pa nga yung sitwasyon. Yun din ang sinabi ni Bongbong Marcos. So you have to have a smart strategy. Hindi yung bara-bara, which is exactly what the Colombian president advice to President Duterte 5 years ago in a piece on New York Times. Anong ginawa? Pinagtawanan ni Duterte. Sino mukhang ewan ngayon, di ba? So anyways, so in fairness to BBM, he's signaling na parang yung sense ko talaga tama na whoever is gonna be our next president, there's gonna be an improvement on the drug war issue. Na hindi lang yung war lang, pero talaga may strategy. Maganda rin yung sagot ni BBM dun sa tanong about victims of rape and allowing them to avail of parang humanitarian intervention, abortion, etc., etc. So, nakikita mo doon na, yes, this is a very sensitive issue. It's a religiously sensitive issue, especially sa ating bansa, especially dahil Katoliko tayo, among others. So, it's good to hear my courage, si BBM on that point, to emphasize na itong trabaho ng Estado to step in and make sure na protektado yung interest ng kababaihan, no? At if they're victims of rape or violence or etc., they have that option, no? They have that option, no? So in fairness, I think that was a tricky, difficult question. Parang si Lacson hindi niya sinagot ng ganun eh. Parang si Lacson he said something like, I need more data, parang longitudinal study, etc. So he tried to, in my opinion, he was working around it. Bongbong Marcos sinagot niya na the state has to make a decision, no? Even though sometimes hindi siya 100% tugma dun sa prevailing moral stance ng religious institutions sa isang bansa. So, that was interesting for him to say. Dun sa issue naman ng debt, kita natin na halos dumoble yung debt from end of President Aquino's term to end of President Duterte's term. So we're talking about like 6 trillion pesos to 11 trillion pesos. So, and then of course, nakikita natin from ERAP to Arroyo, dire-diretso lumalaki at lumalaki yung debt natin at debt servicing was a serious problem in our country. In fairness to BBM, ang sagot niya is quite nuanced na ang point na is, yes, debt is an issue insofar as kung sobrang malaki siya kumpara dun sa size ng economy mo. So you could argue that in fairness to Philippine economy, lumalaki naman siya over the past 10 years or so. So, yung debt to GDP ratio. So, yes, lumalaki yung utang mo, pero lumalaki rin yung kapasidad mo magbayad, no? So, I think it was interesting for Bongbong Marcos to emphasize that na it's really the debt to GDP ratio we have to look at. And, I think we're around 60%, close to 50-60%, or at least yun ang sinabi ni Bongbong Marcos. I have to double check that, which is significantly higher than where we used to be under Aquino. So, in fairness, I think we had more sustainable conditions then. I was hoping sana Bongbong Marcos will mention yung sovereign credit rating, no? Kasi credit ratings are important eh. Dun mo makikita kung affordable yung debt and not. So, pag medyo malaki-laki yung share ng GDP mo yung debt, magiging mas mahal na umutang tayo abroad. Kaya nga yung credit rating ay mahalaga. Sana minention ni Bongbong Marcos yan. I mean, he attended Oxford and studied PPE, right? Political Science, Philosophy, and Economics. So I'm sure he has some familiarity with these issues. No? So sana minention yung issue ng credit rating. And of course, tama yung sinabi niya, medyo lumaki rin ang utang natin recently dahil sa pandemic because we have to deal with the pandemic. Pero actually, sa totoo lang, medyo kapos yung response ng government. And, the thing is, it's also a question of saan napupunta yung utang, 'di ba? Kung napupunta ito sa mga pharmacy, mga ganyan, mga kung ano-ano at hindi napupunta sa productive investments or talaga yung ayuda at tulong sa taong bayan sa panahon ng pandemic or it's not helping to stimulate our economy, may malaki tayong problema, no? So may mga nuances na gano'n na syempre 5 minutes lang meron si Bongbong Marcos at hindi naman siguro lahat mabilis magsalita katulad natin na pwede i-squeeze in 5 minutes lahat ng issue na yan. But I think it's good to hear at least some parang flavor ng parang ano bang level of familiarity ng isang kandidato sa mga ganitong relatively complicated policy issues. So, medyo nuanced yung answer, but I think it could have been further improved. So, sana makikita natin in the future discussions, and sana yung team ni BBM, they have more clarification on these issues. Kasi mahalagang issue ng utang eh. If you badly handle it, then it's going to be a problem. But if it goes to stimulating the economy, productive investment, infrastructure development, then it's okay. No problem. Lalong-lalo na kung lumalaki din yung economy mo. No? So, yun para sa akin yun. But it was interesting. I mean, within that 5 minutes, medyo matino-tino yung discussion. So, I like the format. It gives chance to the candidates to kind of raise that issue, among others. Now, yung issue ng West Philippine Sea, dito medyo, I'll be honest, I'm disappointed on two levels. First of all, hindi ko masyado nagustuhan yung framing ng question ni Tito Boy na parang biglang gyera ang pinag-usapan. Because, I mean, the whole point of strategy, you don't have to read Sun Tzu and something Art of War ko. No, to know that it's never about war per se. It's about psychological games. It's about preventing war by playing your cards well, by leveraging your cards. At dito, going to Bongbong Marcos, medyo disappointed ako na hindi minention at all na, by the way, meron tayong mutual defense treaty with the US. Yes, it's not 100% perfect. Yes, pwede pa improve yan. Yes, may mga issue dyan in some of the provisions. But that's exactly what we have been doing over the past 6, 7, 8 years. Improving the prospects of making sure yung MDT na yan ay talaga useful sa atin. And the Americans under Pompeo and Trump and now recently under Blinken and Biden have emphasized na talagang kung tinamaan yung ating mga barko, mga aircrafts, mga personnel, mga sundalo natin dyan sa West Philippine Sea, pwede mag-apply talaga yung MDT. No? In fact, sinabi ni former US ambassador to Philippines who's now in Indonesia, Sung Kim, na even yung mga gray zone, yung mga militia attack sa ating mga barko, mga ganun, pwede ma-activate niya ng MDT. At anyone who's familiar, just a basic familiarity with what's happening in the US, meron ng bipartisan consensus against China. And if you look at it, tignan mo gaano ka concerned ang US sa Ukraine and gaano ka concerned ang US even more sa Taiwan. And guess what? None of these countries have a mutual defense treaty with the US at all. And yet, look at the level of pressure on Biden to be helpful to these countries. No? Now, imagine, pag pinag-usapan dito, ang Pilipinas, which has a mutual defense treaty. At kung ang US ay inabandon lang tayo pag kunyari may attack ng China, which never is gonna happen, is really tama naman yung sinabi BBM, even China doesn't want war. So at least may improvement from Tatay Digong na parang pag salita tayo magkakaroon ng war. At least in fairness kay Bongbong Marcos na emphasis na yan. But going back to this issue, if Taiwan na ngayon Ukraine, ganun ka concern ng US, alangan i-abandon lang tayo ng US, di ano maging reaction ng ibang allies? Ay, yung pala in-abandon mong Pilipinas, ay wag tayo dito sa Amerika, doon na tayo sa China. So, it's not about Philippines alone. It's about the domino effect it could have. Talagang masisira ang Amerika in terms of yung networks of alliances. So anyways, this is a very complicated issue. We can go into that. You can read my books, etc. I've discussed these things in detail. Sana minention. Kasi parang ayoko yung parang anong klaseng analysis na, US-China paras lang sila. Hindi naman totoo yan. Yung isa, treaty ally natin. Yung isa, sinasakop yung mga natin, di ba? I mean, my goodness, don't this false equivalence argument is very, very problematic to me. And then second, hindi rin minention ni Bongbong Marcos yung Code of Conduct negotiations at saka yung ASEAN mechanisms. So I think there was, yes, tama naman si Bongbong Marcos na you need to engage China bilaterally. But why should we just be confined to that? Tama naman yung sinabi ni Tito Boy na hindi ka naman siseryosoin kung ganyan lang, di ba? Hindi naman tayo sinisir, hindi naman, ang dami natin diplomatic protest. Because yun nga diplomacy works insofar as you have a leverage. And what is the leverage? Using our alliance with the US, strengthening our own defensive capabilities, using international instruments, including arbitration. Tapos, I really hope yung team ni BBM, I mean, they a little bit familiarize themselves with the nuances of the arbitration award. This was not an ICJ case. This was a compulsory arbitration case under Article 287, Annex 7 of UNCLOS regarding maritime entitlement claims. It was not about sovereignty-related disputes per se, but indirectly, because na-nullify na yung 9-dash line ng China, may implication ito dun sa claims natin at sovereign rights issue natin dyan sa West Philippine Sea. So, yung nuances na yan, mahalaga yan. Kasi kung ikaw ay presidente, dapat alam mo yung mga nitty-gritties na yan dahil ito ay nagre-reflect ito sa dun sa kakayahan mo na mag-implement ng effective policy. Now, let me tell you this. Why am I a little bit worked up with this? Is because I'm finalizing a chapter I'm writing on Singapore's foreign policy for a book I'm writing on China. Nalalabas, God willing, later this year by Melbourne University Press, among others. So, kanina, tinatapos ko yung chapter on Singapore. At, I was writing about, talagang inanalyze ko yung ginawa nila Rajaratnam, yung kanilang foreign minister, ni Lee Kuan Yew, ngayon si Lee Hsien Loong. Ang talino talaga ng mga Singaporeans, patriotic talaga, and they leverage. Hindi nga sila ally ng US, but they have been giving Americans access, military access. At the same time, they're buying the best armaments from US. They have been leveraging the ASEAN, international instruments. At the same time, they have huge trade with China. So, kung titingnan mo yung mga kapitbahay natin, I have another chapter naman on Malaysia, Mahathir, etc. And Tun Mahathir, I hope you'll recover soon, sir. The reason why I know how these interviews are is because I had almost a 1-hour interview with Prime Minister Mahathir when he visited the Philippines a few years ago. So ito mga long-form interviews, talaga you have to properly frame the question, give the chance for the person to answer. At hindi ito yung, you're not there to embarrass the guy or to look smart or to have a scoop or etc. That's not proper journalism. You're there to have a proper conversation. Kaya nagustuhan ko ng itong format na to in general. But yun nga, dun sa issue ng West Philippines, I'll be honest, medyo alanganin ako dun sa mga sagot and all. It's not very assuring. And for me, it does not capture the complexity of the situation. And sana, mamaya, basahin niyo yung sinulat ko, Poison Shrimp article, South China Morning Post on